Welcome back to Classic Stories and Fairy Tales. I'm your host and narrator, Jerry Coble. We are still in the book, The Life and Adventures of Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. And today we're looking at Chapter 16, which is titled Rescue of Prisoners from Cannibals. Upon the whole, I was by this time so fixed upon my design of going over with him to the continent that I told him we would go and make one as big as that, and he should go home in it. He answered not one word, but looked very grave and sad. I asked him what was the matter with him. He asked me again, "Why you angry mad with Friday? What me done?" I asked him what he meant. I told him I was not angry with him at all. "No angry," says he, repeating the word several times. "Why send Friday home away to my nation?" "Why," says I, "Friday, did not you say you wished you were there?" "Yes, yes," says he, "wish we both there. No wish Friday there, no master there." In a word, he will not think of going there without me. "I go there, Friday?" says I. "What shall I do there?" He turned very quickly upon me at this. "You do great deal much good," says he. "You teach wild mans be good, sober, tame mans. You tell them know God, pray God, and live new life." "Alas, Friday," says I, "thou knowest not what you sayest. I am but an ignorant man myself." "Yes, yes," says he, "you teach me good, you teach them good." "No, no, Friday," says I, "you shall go without me. Leave me here to live by myself as I did before." He looked confused again at the word, and running to one of the hatchets which he used to wear, he takes it up hastily and gives it to me. "What must I do with this?" says I to him. "You take kill Friday," says he. "What must kill you for?" said I again. He returns very quick. "What you send Friday away for? Take kill Friday, no send Friday away." This he spoke so earnestly that I saw tears stand in his eyes. In a word, I so plainly discovered the utmost affection in him to me, and a firm resolution in him, that I told him then and often after that I would never send him away from me if he was willing to stay with me. Upon the whole, as I found by all his discourse a settled affection to me, and that nothing could part him from me, so I found all the foundation of his desire to go to his own country was laid in his ardent affection to the people, and his hopes of my doing them good, a thing which, as I had no notion of myself, so I had not the least thought or intention or desire of undertaking it. But still I found a strong inclination to attempt my escape, founded on the supposition gathered from the discourse that there were 17 bearded men there, and therefore, without any more delay, I went to work with Friday to find out a great tree proper to fell, and make a large paraguay or canoe to undertake the voyage. There were trees enough in the island to have built a little fleet, not of paraguays or canoes, but even of good large vessels. But the main thing I looked at was to get one so near the water that we might launch it when it was made, to avoid the mistake I committed at first. At last Friday pitched upon a tree, for I found he knew much better than I what kind of wood was fittest for it, nor can I tell to this day what wood to call the tree we cut down, except that it was very like the tree we call fustic, or between that and the Nicaragua wood, for it was much of the same color and smell. Friday wished to burn the hollow or cavity of this tree out, to make it for a boat, but I showed him how to cut it with tools, which, after I had showed him how to use, he did very handily, and in about a month's hard labor we finished it and made it very handsome, especially when, with our axes, which I showed him how to handle, we cut and hewed the outside into the true shape of a boat. After this, however, it cost us near a fortnight's time to get her along, as it were inch by inch upon great rollers into the water, but when she was in, she would have carried 20 men with great ease. When she was in the water, though she was so big, It amazed me to see with what dexterity and how swift my man Friday could manage her, turn her, and paddle her along. So I asked him if he would, and if we might venture over in her. "Yes," he said, "we venture over in her very well, though great blow wind." However, I had a further design than he knew nothing of, and that was to make a mast and a sail, and to fit her with an anchor and cable. As to a mast, that was easy enough to get, so I pitched upon a straight young cedar tree, which I found near the place, and which there were great plenty of in the island, and I set Friday to work to cut it down, and gave him directions how to shape and order it. But as to the sail, that was my particular care. I knew I had old sails, or rather pieces of old sails, enough. But as I had had them now 26 years by me, and had not been very careful to preserve them, not imagining that I should ever have this kind of use for them, I did not doubt but they were all rotten, and indeed most of them more so. However, I found 2 pieces which appeared pretty good, and with these I went to work. And with a great deal of pains and awkward stitching, you may be sure for want of needles, I at length made a 3-cornered ugly thing, like what we called in England a shoulder of mutton sail, to go with a boom at bottom and a little short sprit at the top, such as usually our ships, longboats sail with, and such as I best knew how to manage, as it was such a one as I had to the boat in which I made my escape from Barbary, as related in the first part of my story. I was near 2 months performing this last work, rigging and fitting my mast and sails, for I finished them very complete, making a small stay and a sail or foresail to it, to assist if we should turn to windward, and, what was more than all, I fixed a rudder to the stern of her to steer with. I was but a bungling shipwright, yet as I knew the usefulness and even necessity of such a thing, I applied myself with so much pains to do it, that at last I brought it to pass, though, considering the many dull contrivances I had for it that failed, I think it cost me almost as much labor as making the boat. After all this was done, I had my man Friday to teach as to what belonged to the navigation of my boat. Though he knew very well how to paddle a canoe, he knew nothing of what belonged to a sail and a rudder, and was the most amazed when he saw me work the boat to and again in the sea by the rudder, and how the sail jibbed and filled this way or that way as the course we sailed changed. I say, when he saw this, he stood like one astonished and amazed. However, with a little use, I made all these things familiar to him, and he became an expert sailor, except that of the compass I could make him understand very little. On the other hand, as there was very little cloudy weather, and seldom or never any fogs in those parts, there was the less occasion for a compass, seeing the stars were always to be seen by night, and the shore by day, except in the rainy seasons, and then nobody cared to stir abroad either by land or sea. I was now entered on the 27th year of my captivity in this place, though the 3 last years that I had this creature with me ought rather to be left out of the account, my habitation being quite of another kind than in all the rest of the time. I kept the anniversary of my landing here with the same thankfulness to God for his mercies as at first, and if I had such cause of acknowledgment at first, I had much more so now, having such additional testimonies of the care of Providence over me, and the great hopes I had of being effectually and speedily delivered. For I had an invincible impression upon my thoughts that my deliverance was at hand, and that it should not be another year in this place. I went on, however, with my husbandry, digging, planting, and fencing as usual. I gathered and cured my grapes, and did every necessary thing as before. The rainy season was in the meantime upon me, when I kept more within doors than at other times. We had stowed our new vessel as secure as we could, bringing her up into the creek, where, as I said in the beginning, I landed my rafts from the ship, and hauling her up to the shore at high water mark, I made my man Friday dig a little dock, just big enough to hold her, and just deep enough to give her water enough to float in. And then, when the tide was out, we made a strong dam across the end of it, to keep the water out, and so she lay, dry as to the tide from the sea. And to keep the rain off, we laid a great many boughs of trees, so thick that she was as well thatched as a house. And thus we waited for the months of November and December, in which I designed to make my adventure. When the settled season began to come in, as the thought of my design returned with the fair weather, I was preparing daily for the voyage. And the first thing I did was to lay by a certain quantity of provisions, being the stores for our voyage, and intended in a week or a fortnight's time to open the dock and launch out our boat. I was busy one morning upon something of this kind, when I called to Friday, and bid him to go to the seashore and see if he could find a turtle or tortoise, a thing which we generally got once a week, for the sake of the eggs as well as the flesh. Friday had not been long gone when he came running back, and flew over my outer wall or fence, like one that felt not the ground or the steps he set his foot on. And before I had time to speak to him, he cries out to me, "Oh, master! Oh, master! Oh, sorrow! Oh, bad!" "What's the matter, Friday?" says I. "Oh, yonder there," says he. 1, 2, 3 canoes. 1, 2, 3. By this way of speaking, I concluded there were 6, but on inquiry I found there were but 3. "Well, Friday," says I, "do not be frightened." So I heartened him up as well as I could. However, I saw the poor fellow was most terribly scared, for nothing ran in his head but that they were come to look for him, and would cut him in pieces and eat him. And the poor fellow trembled so that I scarcely knew what to do with him. I comforted him as well as I could, and told him I was in as much danger as he, and that they would eat me as well as him. "But," says I, "Friday, we must resolve to fight them." "Can you fight, Friday?" "Me shoot," says he, "but there come many great number." "No matter for that," said I again. "Our guns will fright them that we do not kill." So I asked him whether, if I resolved to defend him, he would defend me and stand by me, and do just as I bid him. He said, "Me die when you bid die, master." So I went and fetched a good dram of rum and gave him. For I had been so good a husband of my rum that I had a great deal left. When we had drunk it, I made him take the 2 fowling pieces which we always carried, and loaded them with large swan shot, as big as small pistol bullets. Then I took 4 muskets, and loaded them with 2 slugs and 5 small bullets each, and my 2 pistols I loaded with a brace of bullets each. I hung my great sword, as usual, naked by my side, and gave Friday his hatchet. When I had thus prepared myself, I took my perspective glass and went up to the side of the hill to see what I could discover, and I found quickly by my glass that there were 21 savages, 3 prisoners, and 3 canoes, and that their whole business seemed to be the triumphant banquet upon these 3 human bodies. A barbarous feast indeed, but nothing more than, as I had observed, was usual with them. I observed also that they had landed, not where they had done when Friday made his escape, but nearer to my creek, where the shore was low, and where a thick wood came almost close down to the sea. This, with the abhorrence of the inhuman errand these wretches came about, filled me with such indignation that I came down again to Friday and told him I was resolved to go down to them and kill them all, and asked him if he would stand by me. He had now got over his fright, and his spirits being a little raised with the dram I had given him, he was very cheerful, and told me, as before, he would die when I bid die. In this fit of fury, I divided the arms which I had charged, as before, between us. I gave Friday 1 pistol to stick in his girdle, and 3 guns upon his shoulder, and I took 1 pistol and the other 3 guns myself, and in this posture we marched out. I took a small bottle of rum in my pocket, and gave Friday a large bag with more powder and bullets, and as to orders, I charged him to keep close behind me, and not to stir, or shoot, or do anything till I bid him, and in the meantime not to speak a word. In this posture I fetched a compass to my right hand of near a mile, as well to get over the creek as to get into the wood, so that I could come within shot of them before I should be discovered, which I had seen by my glass it was easy to do. While I was making this march, my former thoughts returning, I began to abate my resolution. I do not mean that I entertained any fear